All right. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So last week we talked about we started talking about the Apostles' Fast and why no one fasts the Apostles' Fast. And we concluded that maybe we don't fast the Apostles' Fast because we don't know why. We think we fast for the Apostles when you don't really fast for people per se. And the idea is to focus this time on service. And we talked about friendship last time. If you remember, we talked about the four guys who lowered the paralyzed man, and what true friendship looks like, in that even when we have people who have physical ailments, whatever, a disease, heart condition, financial troubles at work, that bringing people to God is really the right answer in any circumstance, regardless of the situation. And that sometimes God's answer isn't the answer we think it's going to be, right? So they brought this paralyzed man before Christ. They thought he was going to heal him, right? Say, stand up. But he didn't. Instead, he said, your sins are forgiven. And so Christ gave an answer that no one expected, right? And this is an important concept for all of us, because sometimes we bring people to God or to each other, or we go in and we think we know the answer. Friends got troubles, got a problem, someone at work has an issue, and we think to ourselves, all right, here's what you need. But that's not what they need. You actually don't know what they need. And sometimes as friends, we all talk about the other friend who we all know, what she needs to do is blah, blah, blah. And everyone agrees. All the girls agree and all the guys agree and everyone knows what that person needs. It turns out that's not what they need. And you just don't know. And it's very presumptuous on our part to think we know what other people need, right? So what people do need, right, is to come closer to their Maker, right? Come closer to the spiritual life. And then you let God do what God needs to do. God heals the way he heals. He fixes the way he fixes. And it's kind of none of your business after that what God does, right? You just bring people to God and then you let God do, right? And you just stand back and not overly involve yourself in people's spiritual lives or daily lives and give a lot of advice. And we tend to do a lot of that, give a lot of advice. All right, so, I'll just kind of continue with this spirit of service, and the idea of the Apostles' Fast as a time of focusing on service. And the idea behind a fast is always what? To be less me and more God. Less focused on the self, what I'm eating, that's just how it manifests itself. But obviously in other ways, focus less on myself, focus more on God. And so in service, that's very important, right? Because once we focus too much on our own abilities, then we get lost, right? Once we focus a little bit too much on what we're doing, then we get lost. So when you look at the apostles, the 12 apostles, and obviously there's 70 disciples as well, and you look at their lives and their life stories, everyone is extremely different. Some are educated, some aren't, some are gruff, some are vocal, some are quiet. I mean, John, the apostle John, he's as quiet as a mouse. He doesn't speak, right? He's kind of timid. He's kind of a wuss. He was scared to go in the tomb. And Peter, who is a little bit more heavyset, ran past, John ran past him. And then he went in first because he's kind of this gruff guy. And so some are assertive and some are jealous and some are calm and some are excitable. And it's no coincidence that God picks this hodgepodge of people, right? This hodgepodge of group. But what did they have in common? What did all of the apostles have in common? They followed the same guy. And that made them all a unit. And so in the church, we don't look the same, we don't think the same, and we shouldn't be the same, right? And it's a crime when we try to force everyone down the same chute. This is how you act. This is what you do. This is how you serve. Let everyone be, right? We all have, we're all individuals. We all have our unique fingerprint. We all are different from everyone else, and God in his beauty shows us that, right? And says every human has a different fingerprint. That's hard to do. There's 7 billion just alive right now. And yet God adds these touches to us like you're that individual, right? And so it's not about shoving all of us down a mold. It's about following the same guy, right? Because Peter's still Peter and John was still John. And when you read story about St. Moses the Black, he's still St. Moses the Black. In fact, I'll read your story. No, I won't do this story. So St. Moses the Black, when you read his story, even after his conversion, he's still an aggressive, gruff guy. He's just a Christian, aggressive, gruff guy, right? But he's still got that thing in him. It's still him, right? And we all have to still be us, but follow the same guy, right? And that's what unites us as apostles. And this is what St. Paul says, right? We can't all be hands. We can't all be ears. We can't all be eyes. We all have to be different parts, right? And then when Christ uses this analogy, like I'm the head and you're the body, I mean, that's a huge lesson, right? And the more we learn in science, the more we learn how big of a lesson that actually is, right? It's like God's giving us this problem to solve in human time. Like as we start to figure out genetics and DNA and bacteria and all the things we're figuring out, we realize how amazing that statement is. When you realize how many parts to the body there are, and none of them do the same thing, nor should they, right? And so this, let's go out to shoot and let's all do the same concept is not good. And then when we see other people succeeding, because we think we should be doing that, we get a little jealous. And sometimes even in the service, and as you get older, you'll find people in the service sabotaging other people in the service. Why is their meeting better than my meeting? Why is that play, I want this person, I want that person doing this. And people are taking from other people in the service, and they see someone succeed in the service, and instead of being happy, they're like, not happy. And that's weird, right? Because if I'm the brain, and I see the heart doing a great job being heart, I shouldn't be pissed off, right? I should go, good heart, keep going, be a good heart. I'll be a good brain, and you be a good kidney, and you be a good pancreas, right? Everyone should be excited that the other one is doing a good thing, not jealous, not trying to take from the other person. That is inconsistent with the very simple thing that Christ says, I'm the head, and you are members of the body, right? And so keeping that focus allows us to serve with others in a very harmonious fashion, right? So when I see someone doing something different, I go, well, that's because you're a different organ and you work differently than this organ. And that's okay. I don't want that organ and this organ to work the same. And so this isn't contradiction when someone approaches service or approaches friendship different than you do, right? It's completion. It makes us, it unites us, right? It makes us feel like, thank God there are people out there doing it differently than I do it. Thank God there are people who are very, very spiritual, and some people are very scholarly, and some people are very loving, and some people are very remorseful. What's behind me? Huh? Oh. Just a caterpillar? I mean, you had a look. I was scared. You were almost dead based on the looks behind you. All right, so when the apostles observed all of these differences, now you can imagine 12 people coming together. They're all very tightly knit. Are they knit? Were they tightly knit? Did they like the apostles? Did the apostles like each other? They used to argue over who was the best, which is pretty lame, right? They'd get in fights over, I think I'm better than you. No, I think I'm better than you. I mean, this is like second grade Sunday school class here, right? You're just not supposed to do that. And here they're arguing, and then they'd come back, and Christ knew what they're doing, and he's like, what were you guys talking about on the road? And they're like, we're being dumb, right? And so you have this 12 group of people, and this group of 12 people, and they're not the same. They probably don't get along, right? They're probably like, why do you talk like that? Why are you so aggressive? Why are you so passive? Why are you so angry? Why are you so bitter? And I'm sure they had all kinds of discussion. I mean, you hang out together with some guy for 3.5 years, you're going to have some comments. And so why is it that none of these differences stop them from serving? Why didn't that bring them to a halt? Because if I put 12 of you in a group and made you hang out together for 3.5 years, eventually you'd be all pissed off at each other, fighting, bitter, and everyone has a good story of why everyone else is bad. And with lots of examples that you can go on and on about for like 3 or 4 hours and explain to me why all the other 11 are horrible, unlike yourself. Which is, how service works most of the time. So why is it that they were able to keep it together? Because Christ made it very clear to them that he was the one serving through them. Right? And the way he did it is he would give them power. Right? Because it says, I will give you power to cast out demons, heal the sick, raise the dead. And so when I put my hand on someone's head, nothing usually happens. Right? But when they did it, and they said in the name of Jesus, things happened. Now, unless you're a fool, you realize that isn't me, right? Because I put my hand on lots of people's heads and nothing happens. But now I did it and something happened. That's not me, obviously. Right? And so because I realize it's God who serves through me, then all of a sudden someone does, is really good at A and someone's really good at B and someone's really good at C. It doesn't bother me because God is the one working through all of us. Right? Even Jesus said, without me, you can do nothing. Right? So think about this concept. When I see in other people God's hand working, it makes me what? Happy. It makes me love them. It makes me excited to see what they're going to do next. When I see a service successful or a person engaging in a great relationship or a great friendship or just moving on to a different part of their life and succeeding, I see God in them and I'm like, this is great. Look what God's doing in your life. I'm not jealous. I couldn't care less. Be the best kidney you can be. Knock yourself out. So Mother Teresa had this great quote. She says, I'm a little pencil in the hand of God. And I think if we worked more towards being that pencil, life would just be a lot easier. Right? Because a lot of times we don't think we're the pencil. We think we're the CPU. We think we're the computer. We're the processor. There's other people. They're the workers. I'm the thinker. Right? I'm big time. Right? And so when I think of myself as a pencil, right, if you're a pencil, right, and you're in the hand of Einstein and you write the theory of relativity, there's no pencil that thinks it's smart, right? I mean, you'd be a pretty stupid pencil to think, wow, I'm pretty darn smart. I just came up with the theory of relativity, right? Because you realize it's not me. I'm in the hand of someone else. So when we start to observe our gifts as servants, as friends, as parents, as spouses, as husbands and wives, and we start to see the gifts that we have, and you all have gifts. You all have something to give. You have to realize it's not yours. It's given. And you can't take credit for something that's given. It's kind of like when someone's really tall, and then they feel really good about themselves because they're tall. You're like, you didn't do anything. You just were born this way. You're just born tall. How could you be arrogant or take pride in being tall when it's just really genetics? You did nothing to earn tallness. So you can take no pride in being tall. Make sense? So when we start to see the gifts in ourselves, we can choose to say, dang, I'm amazing. Or I can say what? Dang, God is amazing. Look what he did in me. Look what he did in this bunch of dust. Right? It's a caterpillar again. They love you, Habibi. It's all about half white people. Something. I say things that, just shouldn't be said. Okay. All right, so I want to get to this concept of discipleship. So when Christ picked the apostles, His method of discipleship, his method of teaching was not classes, was not lectures, was not sitting in Sunday school, was not going to a sermon. It was discipleship. And that's how he taught. And if you look at all of Jesus' sermons recorded, and I'm sure a lot more were recorded, a lot more were said than recorded. If you count all of them and you add up all of his sermons in the gospel, how much time do you think you get to? If you just read them. I don't know, like a day, 24 hours, 48 hours of talking. Say it's a week. All right. Say he spoke for a week straight. And that's not complete, so let's multiply that times 52. He spoke for a year. So a year of his 3.5 years was him giving sermons. Fine. What did he do the other 2.5 years? What did he do? He just hung out. He was with the disciples. They walked. They told some jokes. They got food. They hung out. He just lived with them. He made himself accessible. And so the best way to interact with another person is not to preach at them. And he didn't preach, by the way, that much to the disciples. He preached to the people. But to the disciples, he did what? He discipled. I want to think of another synonym for that word. Mentor. Good. I want to pick a better one. How about absorption? They absorbed from him like a sponge. They just were in his presence and they watched his eyes and they watched his words and they watched his heart and they watched his actions and they learned from him just being around him. They absorbed. Do you guys absorb from anybody? Who? Your parents. And it's all going to hit you at some point in your lives. You're going to say something when you're mad and you go, oh my God, I sound like my mom. And it's going to happen. I just thought I'd let you know now. And you're going to say something, you're like, holy moly, that's my dad. I was just with someone, a couple guys, they're like 26, 27, and they just got married and it's starting to hit them. They're like, I say the same things my dad says. I'm like, yeah, it gets worse. You're going to, every once in a while, and I told him this story, every once in a while, I'll hear one of my sons say something my dad said in the same way. And I'm like, holy moly, I transferred it to them from my dad. And they don't even know they're doing it. They just think it's them, right? And so they interacted and they watched for years, not from a book, not from a recording, from life, right? From a real person. And Peter even said, we left everything and followed you. We left everything and followed you. So in our service, as we become disciples, the goal isn't to be teachers and lecturers and whatever. The goal is to be disciples of Christ. That's it. You have one goal. Don't try to be a big servant. Don't try to do a lot of stuff and, be the lead this or the lead that. You have one job, right? Because there is a Mary and there is a Martha, right? And Mary sat at the feet of Christ. That's all she did. And Martha ran around like crazy. And he said, Martha, Martha, you're concerned about so much. So it's not that, Martha was doing something wrong. What did Jesus say? Mary chose the better path. Just be in the presence. Just be a disciple. Listen, absorb, feel, reflect, right? And then we start to do what? As we do that, you start to tell jokes like your parents, you talk like your parents, you get mad like your parents, you throw a ship like your parents, right? We do all these things like our parents. What are we doing? We're becoming what? The image and likeness of our parents. And how do we do that? We just have to live in the same house, right? And in fact, many of you, as you become parents, you're going to worry about how to raise kids. What do I do? And as it gets real, like right now, for a lot of you, it's not real, okay? But as it gets real and you're like, oh my gosh, I may have a baby at some point. I'm going to have a kid. What am I going to do with this kid? Right? How am I going to raise them? Am I going to do the right things? And you're going to second guess yourself a million times. You actually don't have to worry because there is very little you can actually do. All you can do is be you. Your kids will be you. And you can't change that. You can't mess it up, and you can't increase the speed with which it happens. They will absorb your characteristics because you are going to be so consistent, and they will see you day in and day out in one situation after the next to the point where you're just going to absorb who they are. So as a parent, you don't really have to worry all that much. The kids will just be like you. All right. And so who is this guy? The guy that we're trying to be the image and likeness of, the person who we're discipling after. He's the guy who washed the feet of the 12 apostles. Now, I just want to give you context. I know you all know this. But the night before he was crucified, he said, I want you to do what I do. Right? In fact, we call that Thursday, the Thursday before the crucifixion. Does anyone know the name we call that Thursday? Covenant Thursday is another word for it. Huh? Maundy Thursday. Very good. Maundy Thursday. What does that mean? What does Maundy mean? It comes from the word mandate or mandatory. Do as I do when you give someone an order. And he told them to do as I do. And what did he do? He washed the feet of the apostles. Now, if you guys don't know this, this was a disgusting job that people would do because everyone's feet are really dirty. You go into someone's house, you're going to make his house dirty. So there'd be a maid who would wash the feet of whoever your guests are. And the maid, which maid do you think got this job? The bottom of the totem pole maid, right? The new maid, okay? The lowest servant, the new guy, right? That's how you earned, you had to go through washing feet duty first before you got to do cooking, okay? So the lowest servant would wash the feet. And this was just a known thing. And then Christ knelt down and started washing the feet of his apostles. And he said, do what I do. One of those apostles did what? Huh? One of the apostles tried to stop him, and he said, if I don't wash your feet, you have nothing to do with me. What did one of the other apostles do? He sold him that night, didn't he? After Christ washed his feet. So after Christ served him, he then went and stabbed him in the back. Does this happen to us? Do people we serve stab us in the back? Of course, all the time. That's what happens. That's the way people are. And it's no different with Christ. It's not like because we're bad and no, it happened to Christ himself. You serve someone, you help someone, you do stuff for someone, and then they go and they not only don't say thank you, they go and they sell you out. They stab you in the back. That's okay. It happened to Christ. It'll happen to us. But I want you to think of that act, and I want you to hear this quote from Saint Ephraim. He says, "O great love beyond measure, all human tongues must remain silent." I love that part. All human tongues must remain silent. The Logos, the Word of God and Creator, has knelt to His creation. Who can imagine such love? Who can speak of this revelation? The Lord of all came to wash our dirt. The Creator knelt to His creation. It's a tremendous act. And when we think of what we've become as people, we're so engrossed by our status and by our degrees and by our power and by our money and by our education that we think that because I am more educated than you, or I have more money than you, or I have a better degree than you, or I went to better school than you, that somehow I'm better than you. That's not only horrible and disgusting, it's misguided, isn't it? And sometimes even scarier, it could happen in the church, can it? Can someone say, you know what, I'm a up here guy, and you're just a down there guy. I'm this rank and you're that rank. I'm this position and you're that position. I have this many people in charge and you have that many people in charge. I'm above you in the pecking order of whatever it is that's going on. Do people do that? Yeah. Is that what Christ did? Nothing like that. So Christ takes power and he flips it upside down. So the concept of power that we have in the world is not one that exists in the church. The concept of service and being served, and Jesus said this, what? He said, I did not come to be served, but to serve. And so when we run around and we want to serve other people, and we want to serve the clergy, and we want to serve the bishops and the popes and even the archdeacons, which I know you all want to do, we have to think about, is that my role? Is that our role? To be served, to walk and be prestigious, to be at the servant meeting, to be at this whatever meeting, to be at... Or is my role to be in the image and likeness of my Father, the image and likeness of Christ, who did what? Knelt to his creation. It's an amazing concept when you think about it. All right. Does anyone have any questions? I have like 20 more slides, but I'll stop if thoughts, questions. I can go on. Yes, sir.
For like the part
You always have good questions, Adifik.
The part about like the pencil feeling proud of, coming up with the theory or whatever. For like us, we do have to make ourselves like available for God to use the talents. Should we take no happiness in
Pride in, you can use the
I
word.
guess pride is,
Yeah.
pride has that negative connotation, but like,
So
I
make
myself available, I put myself in this place, I made this decision. Not to think like I'm officially saved, like I've been there, but like I think the positive emotions could help me keep going.
Sure. Okay, so the question is, should I take pride in the fact that I've made myself available and made myself to be a pencil, and limber enough that Einstein could write with it and write the theory of relativity? And you're like, you know what? I mean, I could have pushed back, but I didn't, right? But you have to realize that very thought means you're not limber, right? Because what you're basically saying, you're taking pride in that characteristic, and even that characteristic is given to you as a gift from God, right? And the way you'll know that work isn't complete in you. Okay, so say you have that thought, man, I'm allowing myself to be used in such an amazing way. That makes me pretty amazing, even though the amazing thing is God, but I'm pretty amazing too, because I'm not recognizing my amazingness. As I re-say it, you can see the problem here. But what happens, and what's going to happen to you, I'll tell you what's going to happen, is you'll be serving in your amazingness, okay? And you'll be like, dang, I'm pretty amazing. And then somebody will come along, God will send somebody who's not nice. And he's just going to poke at a spot in you that's going to hurt. Because they're going to say, you're doing this wrong, or you're pretty stupid, or you're pretty whatever. And you're like, hey, did you not get the memo at how amazing I am? And they'll be like, no, in fact, you're doing this wrong, and I think I'm going to kick you out of the service. And then you're like, oh, you have no idea what you're missing out on, this amazingness that's here, right? And so then what happens is God comes along and he helps us figure things out. Life teaches us. People come into our lives who aren't always the best, and they help us along, right? And they expose to us things inside us that we didn't even know were there. And all of a sudden there's a twinge of that, hey, why are you talking to me like that? I've served this class for 4 years, I know what to do here. And they're like, no, we're going to do this. And all of a sudden you're not as limber pencil as you thought you were. You're like, no, I know what I'm doing. I know how to do this. I do it better than most people. I'm pretty good at it. People ask for me. They know me by name, right? So you'll get that. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I think just me rephrasing your question probably answered your question. Good. Any other questions? He always has good questions. Don't, feel free to not have your question be as good as his question. That's okay. All right, so is that thunder?
Yeah.
So it poured this morning. It could pour tonight, and then the lesson would be over quickly. We'd run to the cars. Yeah, those clouds are moving in our direction, but that's not important. We'll go. I only have 37 more slides. We'll be done quickly. All right. So, how do we acquire this thing, this image and likeness, this work of God in our lives? And the ultimate goal in our lives is this concept of acquiring the Spirit of God in us. So I want to read you this quote by a guy named Saint Seraphim of Sarav. He says, oh no, I have a lot more quotes. All right, I was going to say I can end with this one, but I'll have a lot more. I do love you. The spiritual life doesn't consist in keeping commandments and going to church and saying prayers and reading the Bible and fasting from certain foods. I'll say that again. The spiritual life doesn't consist in keeping commandments and going to church and saying prayers and reading the Bible and fasting from certain foods, which most of us think is the spiritual life. Those things are essential. They are absolutely important. Without them, you just perish. But they are not an end in and of themselves. They are a means to an end. You do those things to open yourself up to the grace of God. And here lies, I think, a very important concept for all of us. We tend to follow the thing and not the person. As a church, we don't follow a set of rules. We don't follow a hierarchy or a structure. We follow a person. We follow the person of Christ. And we do it through this hierarchy and the things that have been kind of handed down to us for the generations. These are things that we have found work. But that's not the thing. And don't ever confuse the actions with the life in Christ. And unfortunately, sometimes we do. Sometimes we think fasting is about fasting properly. And when someone comes off a fast and says, I didn't break it once. Okay, that's nice. And sometimes when you say, one time a guy came up to me and said, I attended every night of Kiek this last, nativity fast. I was there all night. All right. You want me to give you a cookie, brownie? What are you looking for? What does that even mean? That means I achieved an objective. I did a thing. And God counts things, doesn't he? No. God looks at the heart. Just the heart. And all of those things get me somewhere. But that's not what we're going for. We're not trying to achieve milestones. We're not trying to, say, I read the Bible in a year. That's nice. What'd you get out of it? Isn't it better to just read a verse? Right? I mean, when someone says, I read the whole Bible in a year, you're like, how about read judge not that you be not judged? And how about you spend 10 years on that one verse? 10 years. Just try to do that one verse. And then when you're done, work on love your neighbor as yourself. And you can work on that until you die. There, I just saved you a lot of time. right? So instead of trying to achieve milestones and objectives and focus on the rituals and the outside and doing all the things, we have to focus on the person behind it. Otherwise, we're nowhere. You know, Abunam Shoy Kamel, who was just canonized as a saint on June 9th, he's one of my favorite saints. He has this great saying. He says, you know, when a pack of dogs is chasing a rabbit, the dog in the front sees the rabbit. And so the dog in the front's chasing the rabbit because he can see the rabbit. All the dogs behind the dog in the front are chasing the dog in front of them. Right? So every other dog sees what? Another dog's butt. Okay? So you're just chasing the butt in front of you. Now the rabbit keeps running, and eventually the dogs start to fall away. The other dogs in the back. They're like, this is stupid. Where are we going? And they eventually quit. They stop chasing. The only dog that keeps running is which? The one that sees the rabbit. The one that has his eye on the prize. The one that's focused on the goal. All the other dogs get tired and they're like, I'm tired of this. And they stop running. And so you'll find that as we get older, our spiritual lives, sometimes they're very, full of fervor when we're young and we're in college or we're out of college and we're focused and we're doing all the things. And then as we get older, we're like, And what happens is people start to fade away. Who fades away? The people who are looking at the butts of other people. The people who are serving because that guy serves and I like to serve and I like to be a deacon and I kind of like to, I like kids at Sunday school and I kind of like to cook tameya. So I help out at the bazaar and I kind of like doing this and I kind of like doing that. But my eye isn't on the rabbit. My eye isn't on the prize. So after a while, and you've already seen it, right? There's all these people serving in high school, all these people serving in college. And then as you get older, but then you see someone like St. Paul, who to his dying day is just what? Fire. He's just fire. And he doesn't let up. No matter where he is, no matter how old he gets, until his dying day, he's fire. Why is he fire? Because he's in front of fire. He's standing right next to fire. And the fire is consuming him. And he becomes fire. That's the difference. So we don't follow a set of procedures or a set of rules or a bunch of rituals or anything. We follow Christ. We do it through the church. But don't ever be confused that we follow a system. Where do you think Peter's going to reign? Okay, there's so many good quotes. Okay, I want to end with something. Okay, I'll end with this one. Those who make genuine progress in the spiritual life strive to be united with all mankind. They feel a deep concern for the salvation of all their fellow creatures, along with a desire to love and embrace everything and everyone with no exceptions. When they present themselves to God, they want the whole world to be there with them. They would not dare arrive at the divine throne empty-handed and alone. Does that resonate with anyone? It's beautiful. I'll say it again. I know you're all tired. You guys want to go to UTC and eat? It's like, shut up, let us eat. Those who make genuine progress in the spiritual life strive to be united with all mankind. They feel a deep concern for the salvation of all their fellow creatures, along with a desire to love and embrace everything and everyone, with no exceptions. When they present themselves to God, they want the whole world to be there with them. They would not dare arrive at the divine throne empty-handed and alone. I'll tell you a story about this guy. He's an elder, and he was kind of a miracle worker. And he would see things that other people couldn't see. So someone would walk up to him and say, Father, I have a problem. I hate those things. He would say, Father, I have a problem. You hear it. It's just wrong. Are they even wearing helmets? Don't get me started. Bad mark comes out when I hear electric bicycles. What are we talking about? Oh yeah, so he would He's one of the, he could, he could sense your problems. He knew what was going on. So you would walk up and say, I have a problem. He goes, yeah, I know your uncle just died and there's a fight in inheritance. And he would tell you the whole story, right? One of these guys. And of course, you can imagine everybody wanted to confess to him because you'd walk up and he'd tell you what's in your heart. So this room would be full of hundreds of people waiting to confess every day. And this guy would spend 15, 16, 17 hours a day taking confessions. His health started to deteriorate. He's very old, he's very frail, and he's exhausted. And yet he would keep going. And his disciples, his friends would say, Father, you got to rest a little bit. You can't keep doing this. You know what he'd reply? He'd say, if I can't take these people to heaven with me, then I don't want to go. I don't want to go to heaven if I can't take these people with me. That was his feeling. It was a feeling of love, but not in the love that takes, right? In a love like spiritual life isn't just about me. And if you notice, Christ in his commandment is very clear. Love God with all your heart and what? Love your neighbor as yourself. And he puts them right next to each other. And if you work with those two, that's really it. So if I don't love my neighbor as myself, which means, I just want to go to church and I don't want to be bothered. I just want to pray. People bother me. Something's wrong. Right? People can't bother me. Right? Can the heart say the kidney's bothering me? Kidney's cleaning your blood, bro. Right? So no part of the body can say the other part's bothering me. So when you have that feeling and other people are getting in the way of your relationship with God, then you don't have a relationship with God. I mean, St. John says in his epistle, right? You can't say I love God and hate my brother. You just can't. It's impossible. Right? So as we think about the season of service and the apostles and what they did and how they lived, right? What is service? It's not talking and giving a bunch of lessons and doing, it's being with the people you serve and loving them where they're at very consistently, right? And that's what Christ did. That's what discipleship is. Being with people, not talking at them, not giving them advice, not telling them what they need, putting them with Christ, being available to them any way you can be. And how God decides to use you is none of your business. In fact, he probably won't even tell you how he uses you. And you don't need to know. And that's okay. Right? That's not even part of, and it's like, well, I understand what God's doing. What? I'm going to explain to a 2-year-old how a vaccine works? No thanks. Just shut up and take the shot. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I'll stop there. I have so many other quotes. All right, I'll stop. Yes, sir.
So, do you pursue Christ, and as a result, service and loving of others comes, or do you try and incorporate serving and loving as others as a way to pursue Christ?
That's a good question. I would say the former. I say we focus on Christ, and then the rest comes. If you try focusing on the others first, you don't ever really love them. You can't, because you have nothing to give. There's no fire, So it's one of these things, right? It's like, I heard this great analogy. It's like, you're right, the sunset is nice. It's a great analogy. It's like when you get adopted, you're an orphan, right? You're at some orphanage, and then some couple adopts you, okay? All of a sudden, that's dad and mom, right? And also, all of a sudden, I have a bunch of brothers and sisters. And as soon as I get adopted, these are now my brothers and sisters. First the adoption, then the brothers and sisters. And I can't say, I want you as a dad, but I don't want you as a brother. It doesn't work that way. It's a package. So if I accept God as my father, then I have to accept all of you as my brothers. And there's nothing I can do about that, right? I can't accept the fatherhood of God without accepting the brotherhood of all of mankind. And not just the Christians, or not just the Copts, or not just the Orthodox, everybody, regardless. One of the beautiful things about Abuna Bishoy Kamel, again, he just got canonized. At his funeral, and to this day, the number of people who are Muslims, and Muslims and Christians in Egypt don't get along. The number of people who are Muslim who came to his funeral and to his burial and to his tomb in the church is tremendous. They loved him. And the reason they loved him is because he loved them. And they could see it in his eyes. Right? We talked about this last week, with when Jesus said to Levi, he said, "Follow me." And then Levi did. Why? Because he saw the love of Christ in his eyes. And so he did. So I think the first part is that love of God, and then just it naturally flows. It's kind of like having kids, Like I can tell you, I didn't like kids. I don't like kids before I had kids, right? And so kids in general just bother me, okay? But then when I had my kids, when I became a father, my feeling towards children changed. All of them, right? And now they all feel like my kids, right? And so when I'm at church, I'm picking up kids and I'm giving them chocolate and I'm in like total Giddu mode, right? I'm just loving on everybody because that's the feeling I got as a result of becoming a father. I don't know if that's a good example or not, but good. Any other questions? No? Yes?
I think sometimes in service, when people get fatigued or burnt out, and to the point where it's they're not loving exactly what they're doing. It's not that they're not loving the people they're serving, but just what they're doing. Does that at that point become one of those laundry list items that you're talking about, or how do you pronounce that?
Yeah, so the question is, when people serve a lot and they get burnt out and they don't love what they're doing, or they don't love the people they're doing it, or they don't love the circumstances, that's a very common thing. And it's the same with a relationship, right? So people often say, in a relationship, I feel like a doormat. I feel like people are walking all over me. I'm being taken advantage of. And I'm just burning out. I can't keep doing this, right? I can't keep being a doormat. I can't keep giving, right? That symptom, the problem associated with that symptom is you're giving in order to receive, right? So when someone says, I can't just keep giving and giving, the answer is, why not? Well, because I'm not getting. Well, that's the problem. You seem to think you're going to be getting. Now, in a relationship, I get that, right? A guy and a girl, or, friends, I give a little, I get a little, fine. But in my relationship with God, it's one directional, right? So my relationship with people is one directional. Love is one direction, right? Christ gave, he loved, he served, he healed, and then what did he get back? They killed him horribly. And as he's on the cross, they're cussing him out, right? And as he's getting cussed out in pain after giving for 3.5 years, he puts his arms out in a loving fashion and says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, right? So the love is very one directional. In fact, if you look at all the saints in the church, all of them were beat up, pissed upon, crapped on, abused, killed, slaughtered, tortured, all of them, even the ones that didn't die as martyrs, right? That's just, but yet the direction of love isn't, I'm expecting to get anything, right? So the service, we burn out in the service is when we don't, I've been doing this for 5 years, no one cares, Abuna doesn't recognize me, the parents talk crap about me, the kids don't even appreciate what I do, no one gives me any whatever, right? So what does that mean? I want to get, right? But if I just shoot and I don't really care what comes back, I just give, and I don't really care. You appreciate it, you don't. You recognize it, you don't. Even if, I don't even care if you know I did it or not. I don't really care. I'm just going to show love, And then whatever happens, happens. And you turn around and you talk crap about me, okay. You turn around and you thank me, I'm going to ignore that too. It doesn't really matter to me, you know, and you recognize me or you don't recognize me, whatever. And that helps. Because if you look in the history of the church, most of the saints were persecuted by the church at some point, right? It's amazing, right? And you can imagine that feeling. That's a very big, hard trial to be persecuted by the church itself. But that happens, and that's okay. Mike, you had a question?
I was going to add to that. I think when things get dry like that and tough, I think that's where the real service begins, because that's like at the point where we're actually following Christ's path, in terms of like giving and not expecting anything in return, and then being persecuted for it too. I mean, I know Mother Teresa, for example, like she had verified like depression all the way through her service, right? But she was so joyful about it, like all the way through, like you could see it on her face, but she wasn't feeling it necessarily. But she was able to still like push through and display it. So
I agree. I like that a lot. I mean, honestly, guys, it isn't service until it hurts. Otherwise, it's just fun, right? I mean, it's not love until the other person, cusses you out. Then it's just fun, right? Love is when I give and I don't get. Otherwise, it's not love. It's just, Christ said, right? It's not love if I lend to you expecting to receive again. That's not love. That's just a bank, right? When I give you and then you don't give me back, and I'm like, hey, you didn't give me back. You're not loving. You're just a bank. And you expect to be repaid. So the only time it gets real is when it sucks, right? Now you're in the right path. Does that make sense? Now you know you're on the right, and it's easy for me to say, right? But it's not pleasant, right? Some of us have experienced, it's not pleasant to love and not receive back. But that's the only model that works, right? That's the only way marriages stay together. That's the only way relationships stay together. That's the only way service works in general. It's one directional, right? And until it starts sucking, it isn't real. It's just, I love the kids and the kids are fun and I love to do this every year and I make my crafts and I sell them at the bazaar and then I do the thing and I bake the whatever and, I love to go Cub Scouting, so I'm part of the Cub Scout troop and I love it. Right? That's nice, but it's not real yet because it hasn't started sucking yet. Sorry, just dropping truth bombs at everybody. All right, so I'll end with the verse from Christ. A new command I give you, a new one. Love one another. Is that new? Not really. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So also you must love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. That's how they'll know we are Christian, right? And glory be to God forever, amen. You guys can go to wherever you're going to go.